There are two kinds of people in this world. The people who fail to do what they know they should, and those who keep doing things they know they shouldn't. Guess what? You're both. Hi, I'm your host, life and business coach, Marcy Barker, aka your loving kick in the pants. In this podcast, I'll teach you the 6 steps of my accountability code that will help you wake up with clarity and show up with aligned action steps that make follow through easy and peaceful. All right, let's jump in.
Hello, my beautiful people. Today, I am really looking forward to talking about consistency and how getting support in your journey can really make lasting change and give you sustainable results. I was on a call with a potential client yesterday and I asked her what her big goal was, and the word that she kept saying was consistent. I want to be consistent. And after chatting with her, that meant for her, she wanted to have clients coming in at a steady rate instead of closing clients, making money in a month, and then the next month having really nothing to do and no money coming in. And she knew she was capable of creating clients and opportunities, but she's struggling to do it regularly to turn it into a business that she knows she can depend on. So consistency is also something that a lot of people crave. And in my mind, it's a little odd because I see consistency everywhere in a lot of people. And I do want to point out that consistency is not always good. As in, we're not always consistent with the good things. However, we as human beings are extremely consistent in the way that we behave. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to make lasting change that is in fact desirable and how to make it sustainable so that you can trust yourself to level up instead of just trying something and hoping that it works. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you're kind of like, what is wrong with me and what's wrong with the process that I'm doing? So very first thing that I want to tell you is, first of all, take a deep breath and lean into the fact that you as a human being has the capacity to be extremely consistent with anything that you want to create. Our brain is wired to conserve energy, to feel pleasure, and avoid pain. That first one I talked about, conserving energy, your brain is going to lean on the habits that you do on autopilot if you do them enough and if they bring you the sort of reward that you're looking for. First, let's talk about what the challenges are of achieving lasting change. You might find yourself A, falling into cycles of short-term motivation followed by burnout. B, finding overwhelm and difficulty maintaining new habits that you're trying, or C, a lack of support and accountability leading to going back to your old habits. Now, falling into short-term motivation is not a bad thing. However, if that new piece of motivation is so incredibly different than what you're used to, that's where we find it difficult to maintain new habits. So it's going to be a mix of these things. If you are like, I am really not consistent. I tried this thing, I did it for a little bit, but then I completely forgot about it and I never did it again. Again, you're normal. And my job as a life and business coach who specializes in accountability is to help you break down your goals into manageable items so that your new habits are not extreme. I can't say this enough. If they're too extreme, your body, your mind, your soul is going to not be familiar with what you're trying to do. And that's why it's hard to maintain. So let me give you an example, okay? I had a client who wanted to do a morning routine. And she said, every time I've done this morning routine, I have felt better. And I know that my entire day goes better because I've done these things. And she was using the SAVERS method, I believe it is, from the Miracle Morning. And SAVERS is an acronym for silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So writing, fancy word for writing. So if you think about all these things, silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing or writing, that's a lot of stuff to do. So if you go and read the Miracle Morning and you're like, hey, I want to start with this thing, but you're not used to sitting in silence, You think affirmations are kooky. Visualization takes over your entire brain because you can't focus. Exercise is non-existent in your life. You have never picked up a book in the last year, and you don't even have a pen or paper handy. This is how starting a new routine can be so foreign that it's incredibly hard to start or maintain. Now, I'm not knocking on a morning routine or anything like that, but I want you to know that if you are accepting a goal or an expectation that is very unrealistic for you, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, I'm not saying don't set any goals. That is definitely not what I'm saying. But I want you to understand that if you have a challenge of being consistent, I want you to look through these different things that you're trying to do and ask yourself if they're even realistic. Because if they're not realistic, like we talked about, you're going to find overwhelm and difficulty in maintaining new habits. And if something is too difficult, guess what? Your brain doesn't like that. Your brain doesn't like challenges. It wants to be rewarded and it wants to enjoy life without too much work. The last challenge that I mentioned with achieving lasting change is a lack of support or not having any accountability to help you. This can also be a touchy subject if you feel alone in the life that you're trying to create. A very small example is me becoming a morning person affected my husband because we were not going to bed at the same time. I needed his help putting kids to bed because I had a bedtime now. And in the morning, I was up, and getting kids ready for school really put a damper on his ability to sleep in. So I want you to recognize that a lack of support does not necessarily mean people want you to fail. It just means that not everybody around you is accepting the same goals. And that's something that you have to consider when you're taking on a new goal to be consistent at something. All right, so let's jump into the second part of this, is why consistency is so important, or why this goal of being consistent is very motivating to people. The reason why consistency is so important is because it helps you solidify new habits. New habits, again, are what our life is completely based on. So this client that I talked about in the beginning of the podcast, she had something inside her that made her feel like she wasn't doing her best or she wasn't reaching her full potential within business. So you have this little nudging inside that's like, man, if you could just do this all of the time, then we wouldn't have these problems. So I want you to understand that your goal to be more consistent is 100% valid, because you're going to satisfy those nudges that you feel inside of like, yeah, I can do better, and I can make this a new part of who I am. The other reason why creating consistency in your life is so important is because your consistency provides motivation and guidance to other people. And back when I was doing a lot of personal training in one of my programs, I talked about how elevating others is a really good sign of maintaining all of the healthy habits that you have created. And I don't know about you, but being around other successful and consistent people does a lot for my own habits and my own goals. So your desire to create support and consistency in your life is not something that's going to benefit just you, but it's going to benefit your spouse, your business partner, your children, everybody who you're around. So I share in the sentiment of wanting to be consistent, because consistency helps us avoid the pain like we've talked about. The third part of why consistency is important is because if you didn't have the goal or the ability to be consistent, you really cannot depend on a life you can trust. Like every single day would be a guessing game, and I cannot tell you what kind of stress that could put on your brain and your body of not knowing what's going to happen. And I love the term mental fatigue because it is so real and it resonates with me, because I don't want to make a ton of decisions. I have told people I literally don't care about that choice that you just gave me. Like, you can pick, it has nothing to do with me, and I would rather spend my mental energy and my brain power on things that are going to affect me. So having a consistent life is truly a blessing. And again, if you're like, I want more consistency, just know that the fight for making it happen is 100% worth it. And this podcast will help you develop consistency because I'm going to share a few tips with you. The first tip I have for you is called single tasking. Now, single tasking might sound like not very productive. However, single tasking is exactly what it sounds like, the opposite of multitasking. And you're breaking down your long-term goals or tasks into very small things that you can focus on. The reason why single tasking is going to be important is because when you're creating a new habit, you are telling your brain, hey, that pathway that you normally take, which you don't even have to think about, we're going to change that today because I don't want to go to bed without brushing my teeth anymore. Whatever the example is, if you single task and you really focus on that one behavior change, then it's going to be easier for your brain to develop that new pattern. But let's say that I wanted to be consistent with taking my vitamins every morning and every evening. Well, if I don't set aside my vitamins to a place where they're easy to find and easy to consume, then that's like telling my brain, hey, figure out this puzzle first and then take the vitamins. So in order to make my goal of being consistent with taking my vitamins easier, I'm going to focus on it, which means I'm going to put my vitamins in a place where I can see them regularly. I'm going to have them ready, and I'm going to make sure that I have my water or a snack right there to consume them. And this is exactly what I do now. When I am focusing on taking my vitamins, like it happens. It happens way more. But if I put them in a cupboard and tell myself I'll remember later, like it's just not going to happen. So single tasking is your ability to say, this is a new brain pathway I want to create. So let me be very clear in how my brain is learning it. And this approach really works because it prevents overwhelm.
Hey listeners, the message of waking up and showing up is yours for the taking. In fact, it's free. I've recorded my entire audiobook and I'd love for you to consume it between episodes. Head to marcybarker.com to get instant access to the accountability code Wake Up and Show Up. All right, let's jump back in.
The second tip I have for you is to get an accountability partner. Now, I sometimes cringe when I see this on social media when somebody's like, I need a gym buddy, or I want to go walking with somebody, or I need an accountability partner. And it's very rare for you to find some random person on the internet that's really going to hold you accountable. So when I say accountability partner, I want you to find somebody who can be very specific with you in that one thing that you want to do. So for example, okay, the vitamins, let's go back to that. I bought these vitamins from one of my clients who is a rep for this company. I love the vitamins, and guess who cares the most besides me if I take my vitamins? That client of mine. So if I'm looking for an accountability partner in any area of my life, I encourage you to find one who actually cares about your goal. And bonus if it benefits them if you actually accomplish the thing. So having external accountability can help you maintain your motivation and your focus. And there's nothing wrong with finding a way for your habit to benefit you and somebody else, because some of us really like that external motivation or the reward of saying, I did it today. And of course, my client is going to be so excited when my vitamins run out and I'm going to need to get more. So don't make having an accountability partner something that has to be very forced. Don't feel like you have to find somebody who's perfectly matched. All you have to do is find somebody who cares about that one little thing you're focusing on and then go from there. Another example of this is, if you want to be better or more consistent about putting your kids to bed, then get a buy-in from your kid. Like, what do they want to do with you every night? Do they want to talk about their day? Do they want to read a story? Do they want to wash their face with you? Like, whatever it is, an accountability partner can be amazing. But my tip for you is just make it really focused. The third tip I have for you is to create a ritual or a routine based around your desired change. So for example, one thing that I like to do, I've done this for years and years, it's so stupid and simple, is I will wash my face, not even wash my face. I will use like a makeup wipe to get my makeup off. And then after I'm done wiping my face, I will use the same wipe and clean out my sink. And I know that this is not new. Like, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. And maybe some of you are like, I've never heard of that. And that is the weirdest thing I've ever, ever encountered. However, doing this keeps my sink clean and I get to enjoy a clean sink. And I'm at my sink every single day. And so having the ownership of I take care of my home, I take care of my space, and it's ready for me to take care of myself, that ritual, a very single habit that I'm consistent at, does a lot for the next habits in line. Now, a ritual, I mean, you don't even have to call it a ritual if that seems like super a lot for you, but it really just needs to be something that happens over and over for a purpose. That's the reason why it's called a ritual. It needs to have a purpose. So when you understand, like, what is the purpose of me washing my face is so I can feel better in the morning. What's the purpose of me cleaning my sink is that I feel ownership over the things that I take care of. So creating a ritual, I want you to recognize what is the purpose behind this one little thing I want to be consistent at. So let's talk about the client who had the morning routine. If she went back to that acronym of SAVERS, silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, scribing, first I would ask her, which ones do you really care about? You probably don't need to do the whole morning routine, but let's talk about why these things are important to you. And we actually did that with a client. I said, why is visualization important to you? And she's like, actually, it's not. Like, I don't really like that part. And I'm like, okay, then we don't need to force you to be consistent at something that you don't really want to do. So creating a ritual, I would say, is putting purpose behind that action so that you are way more likely to do it. Remember, the brain is wired for 3 things, and one of them is to feel pleasure. And the coolest part about feeling pleasure is that you get to decide what's pleasurable or not. Some of you might not care about having a clean sink, but for me, that's something that makes me feel good about the life I'm creating and how I take care of myself. Seems very, very simple, but for me, it works. The 4th tip I have is to monitor your progress, okay? You will see all over the internet, Pinterest, Canva, even different tracking charts that you can use. I'm a fan of those. However, those can be very overwhelming because you want to add as many consistent habits as you want to develop. Like, I remember doing this one time and I saw a spreadsheet or a grid paper that had like 25 different habits or tasks that you were supposed to complete every single day for 30 days. Like brush your teeth, brush your hair, say your prayers, vitamins, 15-minute walk. A cold shower, cold plunge, stuff like that. And monitoring your progress is very important, but I want you to recognize that doing these other things first, like single tasking or creating a ritual, is going to help you recognize how to monitor the progress that you're doing, okay? So one way to monitor your progress is to put it right in front of your face. Is it a chart? Is it on your phone? Is it in an app? Or you can actually look at the results that are coming from what you're doing. So I can look at my sink and I can say, okay, this obviously has been done recently. I'm doing a great job. Or how is my face? Am I breaking out or am I washing my face often enough that I feel good about it? Monitoring progress can happen in a lot of different ways. And if you're familiar with the accountability code, we talk about commitment being those black or white things that you can prove that you did. Now, when it comes to creating a new habit, I don't want you to be super crazy about it. Maybe you are the kind of person who loves the spreadsheets, but you don't have to be that crazy about it if you don't want to. The most important thing to recognize about monitoring your progress is that you get motivation from doing it. You get motivation from being like, I did it. My vitamins are gone. I took the whole box. I'm doing really well. Or even like my face looks great. I've been consistent with washing it. Or, I love going to bed at night because my husband is getting better at making the bed for me. Like, monitoring it literally is you being aware of the changes that you're creating in your life. And that's a really beautiful thing that creates pleasure, which means you're going to want to do it again. The fifth tip I have for you is to cultivate a supportive environment. Now, one of my favorite books ever, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I remember in his book somewhere, it talked about how he placed water everywhere around an office or something like that. And when water was placed around the office, people were drinking it. But when water was not placed around the office, like, nobody was drinking water because it wasn't there. And I want you to recognize that if you are creating a space that supports your habits, that is kind of like a hack. Like, if you don't want to drink soda, then don't have soda on your counter or in your fridge. If you have a positive environment or ecosystem around you that reinforces consistent efforts, you're going to see a lot more positive change. And this happened to one of my friends. He was not enjoying his job at all. It was not a great schedule. And every day he came home from work, he just was kind of drained. And as soon as he switched jobs where he could be social and there were rewards for his progress and it was a better schedule, like, it made such a difference in his demeanor and his habits. So this one can also be super tough. Like, you might be listening to this and you're like, I know that my job drags me down. Like, I know that, or I know that this friend is not really a friend, or I know that this relationship is really dragging me down. I encourage you to really take a look at that and see if that's the next thing you need to do so that all of your consistent habits can become manifested. Really, your ability to be consistent is made up of a lot of different factors, and cultivating a supportive environment, I would say, is probably one of the most powerful, because your environment can either uplift you and propel you forward, or it can pull at your feet and it can keep pulling you backwards. Before we end this episode, I want to encourage you to just pick one thing at a time, okay? We talked about single tasking, but before you even do that, I want you to ask yourself, what's that one thing in my life that I do wish to be consistent at? So with that client in the beginning of the podcast, if you're talking about bringing in consistent, high-paying clients, we're going to have to break that down a little bit. And the beauty of the accountability code is that is exactly what it is designed to do. So if you have not yet, get my audiobook, you can get my workbook on Amazon, and even better yet, book a call with me if you want to break it down in less than 30 minutes. We can totally do that. On your journey of creating consistency, I want to remind you that this fight is worth the effort. I want you to know that as you work to up-level yourself and create lasting change, that work is never a waste. In conclusion, I want to just remind you that we talked about single tasking, getting a focused accountability partner, creating a ritual or a purpose, monitoring your progress, and cultivating a supportive environment. If you need help with any of these, I'm more than happy to discuss these with you. But ultimately, I'm so glad that you tuned in for another episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants.
Hey friends, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants. If you got any value out of this episode, I would love for you to drop me a review or share with a friend what you learned. All right, I'll see you next Wednesday for Your Loving Kick in the Pants.